There's a man who walks into a room full of chaos, and everything changes. Not because he speaks the loudest or commands attention with grand gestures, but because he carries something the others don't. Silence that cuts deeper than any sword. Presence that unsettles those who live by manipulation. He's learned what most men never will, that the greatest power isn't in what you say. It's in what you refuse to engage with. You see him there. In the corner of your mind, the man who doesn't flinch when others shout, who doesn't defend when others attack, who doesn't explain when others demand answers. This is the Stoic, and he's about to teach you something that will change how you move through this world forever. They want your reaction. You give them reflection. Listen closely. Because what I'm about to share with you has been forged in the furnace of human nature. For over 2,000 years, it's been tested by emperors and slaves, by warriors and philosophers, by men who understood that true strength isn't measured by how hard you can hit back, but by how unmoved you can remain when the storm comes for you. The manipulator enters your life. Like a poison disguised as medicine, they study you. They watch for your triggers, your insecurities, your need to be understood. They learn the language of your pain and speak it fluently. They offer false kindness wrapped in barbed wire. They give you sympathy that costs you your peace. They make you feel special while slowly making you smaller. You've met them. The friend who twists every conversation back to their drama. The partner who makes you question your own memory, your own reality. The coworker who plays victim while orchestrating your downfall. The family member who uses guilt like a weapon, love like a leash. They operate in shadows, these emotional predators, feeding on the reactions they can extract from your soul. But here's what they don't expect. Here's what breaks their entire system. Nothing. Your nothing becomes their everything. Your silence becomes their noise. Your stillness becomes their chaos. Marcus Aurelius knew this when he wrote that we suffer more in imagination than reality. The manipulator's greatest weapon is your imagination, your need to fill the silence with explanations, to bridge their emotional gaps with your energy, to solve puzzles they've deliberately scattered. But what happens when you stop trying to solve what was never meant to be solved? You panic. The Stoic doesn't block or argue. He becomes emotionally invisible. You're sitting across from someone who's just accused you of something you didn't do. Their voice rises, their finger points, their face contorts with manufactured rage. You're putting on a performance expecting you to audition for the role of defendant in their personal drama. But you don't take the stage. You don't even acknowledge there's a theater. You look at them the way you'd look at weather, with interest but no investment. The way you'd observe a child having a tantrum in a grocery store with compassion but no obligation to participate. Your face remains calm, your breathing stays steady, your heart doesn't quicken to match their artificial emergency. This is not coldness, this is clarity. Epictetus, a man who knew slavery and freedom, who understood the difference between what owns you and what you own, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. The manipulator needs your permission to wound you. They need your energy to fuel their chaos. They need your reaction to validate their fiction. You don't give it to them. Where others fight with fire, you disappear like smoke. The beauty of this approach isn't just in what it does to them, though we'll get to that. It's in what it does to you. Every time you choose not to react, you grow stronger. Every time you refuse to explain yourself to someone who's already decided not to understand, you become more yourself. Every time you let their words bounce off your silence like stones off water, you discover something profound. You don't need their validation. You don't need their understanding. You don't need to be right in their eyes. This realization is freedom. But let's talk about what happens to them when their favorite toy stops working. When their most reliable puppet stops dancing, when their emotional victim refuses to play victim anymore, they escalate. First, they'll try harder. The accusations become more dramatic. The guilt trips become more elaborate. The fake emergencies become more urgent. They're like a gambler who keeps pulling the slot machine lever. It's convinced that just one more pull will give them the jackpot of your emotional response. But you remain still. not stubborn still. There's a difference. Stubbornness is rigid, reactive. Stillness is fluid, responsive only to what deserves response. Then they'll try a different approach. Suddenly, they'll become reasonable, apologetic. Even they'll claim they were just stressed, just worried about you, just trying to help. This is not growth, this is strategy. They're switching from the stick to the carrot, testing if kindness can extract what cruelty couldn't. You observe this too, with the same calm interest. You don't reward the manipulation just because it's wearing a prettier mask. When that fails, they'll go to others. They'll recruit allies to their cause, painting you as the problem. They'll spread stories about your silence, twisting your strength into coldness, your peace into indifference. They'll try to shame you back into the dance through social pressure. This is where most people break. This is where the need to defend, to explain, to be understood overwhelms the wisdom of silence. But not you. Not anymore. Seneca understood that no one can make you an inferior person without your consent. The opinions of those who've been fed lies about you are not your responsibility to correct. The image of you that exists in confused minds is not your property to manage. Your reputation belongs to you. Their opinion of your reputation belongs to them. The greatest revenge is not needing revenge. Watch what happens when you fully embrace this truth. The manipulator, deprived of the emotional supply they crave, begins to wither. Their tactics lose power not because you've fought them, but because you've transcended the need to fight. They become increasingly desperate, increasingly transparent, increasingly alone with their own reflection. Others begin to see what you saw all along. The pattern becomes clear when you're no longer participating in it. The drama looks different when there's only one actor on the stage. The manipulation becomes obvious when there's only one person trying to manipulate. You didn't have to expose them, you just had to stop enabling them. The Stoic doesn't need to win because he's already won. He won the moment he decided that his peace was worth more than their approval. He won when he chose his own emotional sovereignty over their emotional dictatorship. He won by refusing to play a game where the only victory condition was his defeat. But there's something deeper happening. Here's something that goes beyond mere tactics or strategies. When you stop reacting to manipulation, you start responding to life. When you stop defending yourself from attacks that were never real, you start building something that is real. Your silence becomes sacred space. In that space, you find yourself. Not the self that reacts and defends and explains and justifies, but the self that simply is. The self that doesn't need external validation because it's found internal validation. The self that doesn't fear other people's opinions because it's learned to trust its own judgment. This is what the ancient Stoics called the inner citadel of the fortress of your mind that no external force can breach without your permission. It's not built with walls and weapons. It's built with discernment and discipline. You learn to distinguish between what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Between what requires your response and what requires your indifference. Between what calls for engagement and what calls for observation. The manipulator operates on the assumption that everything is about them, that every situation should revolve around their emotional needs, that every relationship exists to serve their psychological hunger. But you know something they don't. Nothing is about them. Their manipulation is about their own insecurity. Their aggression is about their own fear. Their need to control you is about their inability to control themselves, their desperate attempts to make you react, or about their desperate need to feel powerful. You see this not with judgment, but with understanding, not with anger, but with compassion, not with the desire to punish, but with the wisdom to protect. Protection doesn't always look like walls and weapons. Sometimes it looks like water flowing around obstacles rather than fighting them. Finding your own path rather than forcing theirs to change. When they try to guilt you, you remain unguilty. When they try to shame you, you remain unashamed. When they try to anger you, you remain uninjured. Not because you're suppressing these emotions, but because you're choosing not to manufacture them in response to artificial stimuli. You didn't raise your voice, and they collapsed in their own noise. The power of this approach extends far beyond dealing with obvious manipulators. It changes how you move through the world. The coworker who tries to provoke you in meetings finds themselves talking to a calm professional who neither takes the bait nor acknowledges the trap. The family member who's used emotional blackmail for decades discovers that their old methods no longer work on the new you. The friend who's always been able to make you feel guilty for having boundaries encounters someone who sets boundaries without guilt, without explanation, without apology. The romantic partner who's used jealousy and insecurity as tools of control finds themselves with someone who cannot be controlled because they cannot be made insecure. Your calmness becomes their chaos. Your peace becomes their problem. But here's what's beautiful about this transformation. It's not about becoming hard or cold or indifferent. It's about becoming discerning. It's about developing such a strong sense of your own worth that you can't be convinced to devalue yourself for someone else's comfort. You become like a mountain moved by the storms that rage around it, providing shelter for those who seek it, but never bending to accommodate the wind just because it blows loudly. The ancient Stoics had a practice called the view from above. They would imagine themselves from a cosmic perspective, seeing their problems as part of a much larger tapestry. Understanding that what felt overwhelming from ground level looked manageable from a higher vantage point. When someone tries to manipulate you, take the view from above. See their behavior as part of their own internal storm system. Understand that their need to control you comes from their inability to control themselves. Recognize that their attempts to diminish you are really attempts to feel bigger than their own insecurities. From this perspective, their manipulation isn't about you at all. It's about them trying to escape themselves, and you happen to be convenient. Raw material for their escape attempt. You don't have to provide that raw material. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you've already decided who's worth your energy. The decision of worthiness isn't made in anger or frustration. It's made in clarity. Some people have earned the right to your emotional investment through their consistent demonstration of good faith, mutual respect, and genuine care. Others have demonstrated through their actions that they view you as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. Your energy is finite. Your peace is precious. Your emotional investment is currency. Spend it wisely. The manipulator counts on you spending that currency carelessly, reacting to every provocation, responding to every demand, defending against every accusation. They create artificial urgency around meaningless conflicts. They manufacture crises that require your immediate emotional labor. But you've learned something they haven't. You've learned the power of the pause between stimulus and response. There's a space. In that space lies your freedom. Shares your freedom to choose how to respond, whether to respond, when to respond. The manipulator tries to collapse that space, to make you react automatically, to bypass your conscious choice. You expand that space. You make it sacred. Use it to ask yourself, does this deserve my energy? Does this person's opinion of me change who I am? Does this situation require my participation? Usually the answer is no. When you consistently choose not to feed the drama, something magical happens. The drama starves. Without your participation, their emotional theater becomes a one-person show. Everyone can see it for what it is. You don't expose the manipulator. You simply stop concealing them from themselves. Their mask falls away. Not because you tear it off, but because they can no longer maintain it without your cooperation. Their manipulation becomes obvious not because you point it out, but because you're no longer participating in the illusion that it's anything else. This is psychological Aikido, using the manipulator's own energy against them. It's not through force, but through the absence of resistance. They push against you, expecting you to push back, but you're not there to push against. You've stepped aside, and they fall forward into their own dysfunction. You're not cold. You're clear. There's a difference between emotional unavailability and emotional sovereignty. The cold person shuts down because they're afraid of feeling. The clear person chooses their feelings because they're unafraid of discernment. You feel compassion for the manipulator without feeling obligated to enable them. You recognize their pain without accepting responsibility for healing it. You understand their behavior without excusing its impact. This clarity allows you to respond from wisdom rather than react from wound. It allows you to see what's actually happening, rather than what you're being told is happening. It allows you to trust your own perception rather than defer to someone else's interpretation. The manipulator's greatest tool is confusion-making. You doubt your own experience, question your own reality, second-guess your own judgment, but clarity cuts through confusion like light cuts through darkness. When you're clear, you see that their emergency isn't your emergency. Their chaos isn't your responsibility. Your emotional weather isn't something you need to take shelter from, something you can observe from your own inner stability. Marcus Aurelius wrote about being like the rock against which the waves continually break. The rock doesn't fight the waves or get angry at them or try to convince them to be different. It simply remains itself, and eventually, the waves exhaust themselves against its unchanging presence. This is your power, not the power to control others, but the power to remain yourself regardless of what others do. Not the power to force others to treat you well, but the power to be unaffected when they choose not to. The manipulator operates from scarcity. They believe they need to take your energy to have enough for themselves. But you operate from abundance. You have so much inner stability that you can afford to be generous with it, sharing it with those who appreciate it while protecting it from those who would exploit it. Don't wrestle in the mud with snakes. Let them hiss while you walk past. The snake's hiss is designed to intimidate, to make you believe you're in danger when you're simply in proximity to their fear. But you've learned the difference between actual threats and theatrical ones. You've developed the ability to distinguish between someone who's genuinely in distress and someone who's performing distress for an audience. When you walk past without stopping, without defending, without explaining, you're not being cruel. You're being wise. You're recognizing that some battles aren't worth fighting, not because you can't win them, but because winning them would cost you more than losing them. Your peace is worth more than their drama. Your energy is worth more than their chaos. Your emotional stability is worth more than their temporary satisfaction. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent to genuine suffering. It means you become skilled at recognizing the difference between someone who needs help and someone who needs an audience, between someone who's asking for support and someone who's demanding performance. The genuine person accepts your help gracefully and uses it to improve their situation. The manipulator resents your help because it threatens their victim identity and demands more help because your assistance wasn't enough to fill the void. They're using you to avoid facing. You learn to help the genuine and observe the manipulative. You learn to engage with good faith and disengage from bad faith. You learn that compassion doesn't require participation in someone else's dysfunction. There's a practice in Stoicism called negative visualization, imagining the loss of what you value in order to appreciate it more fully. But there's another side to this practice, imagining yourself without the things that drain you in order to appreciate your freedom from them. Imagine yourself without the obligation to manage someone else's emotions. Imagine yourself without the need to defend your character to people who've already decided what they think of you. Imagine yourself without the compulsion to explain your choices to those who wouldn't understand, even if you could make them see. This isn't fantasy. This is possibility. This is what's available to you when you stop participating in manipulative dynamics. This is what waits on the other side of your silence. The most dangerous man is the one who doesn't flinch. Not dangerous because he threatens others, but dangerous to the systems that depend on his cooperation with their dysfunction. The manipulator's power comes from your predictable reactions. They know that if they push this button, you'll respond with anger. They pull that lever, you'll respond with guilt. If they activate this trigger, you'll respond with the need to prove yourself. But what happens when the buttons stop working? When the levers move but nothing responds? When the triggers are pulled but no explosion follows? The manipulator finds themselves in a world where their primary skill, the ability to provoke emotional reactions, has no value. They become a magician whose tricks no longer fool anyone, a salesman whose product no one wants to buy. They become irrelevant. Not because you've made them irrelevant, but because they've made themselves irrelevant by building their identity around a skill that only works on people who choose to participate. You've chosen not to participate. This choice ripples out beyond your relationship with that particular manipulator. It changes how you show up in the world. People sense that you can't be easily moved, easily provoked, easily controlled. They sense that your emotional responses are yours to give, not theirs to extract. This makes you simultaneously more approachable and more untouchable. More approachable because you're not carrying the defensive energy of someone who's constantly protecting themselves from manipulation. More untouchable because you're clearly not available for the kind of emotional exploitation that many people unconsciously expect from their relationships. You become someone who can be trusted because you can't be used. Someone who can be loved because you can't be leveraged. Someone who can be respected because you can't be manipulated. The Stoic wins by not needing to win victory. For the manipulator, looks like getting you to react, getting you to engage, getting you to participate in their emotional drama. Their win condition is your loss of peace, your loss of clarity, your loss of emotional sovereignty. But your victory looks different. Your victory is maintaining your peace regardless of their behavior. Your victory is keeping your clarity despite their attempts to confuse you. Your victory is preserving your emotional sovereignty, even when they're trying to make you their emotional colony. You win by remaining yourself. They lose by revealing themselves. This is the ultimate form of strength, not the strength to overpower others, but the strength to remain unimpressed by others' attempts to overpower you, not the strength to hurt those who try to hurt you, but the strength to remain unhurt, regardless of their efforts. Seneca wrote that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Your beginning as someone who cannot be manipulated comes from the end of your identity as someone who feels obligated to participate in every emotional drama that seeks your involvement. That old self, the one who felt responsible for managing other people's feelings, who believed that not defending yourself meant accepting guilt, who thought that silence in the face of accusations was admission that self is dying not violently, not dramatically, but quietly, naturally, like a snake shedding skin that no longer fits. The new self that's emerging is both softer and stronger. Softer because you no longer need to maintain defensive armor against attacks that you've learned to simply sidestep. Stronger because you've discovered the unshakable foundation of your own inner authority. This inner authority doesn't come from defeating others in battle. It comes from refusing to battle with those who aren't worth your warfare. It comes from recognizing that some people are fighting shadows and choosing not to become one of those shadows. When someone tries to make you angry and you remain calm, you've won. When someone tries to make you defensive and you remain secure, you've won. When someone tries to make you small and you remain yourself, you've won. These victories don't come with fanfare or recognition. They happen in the quiet moments when you choose your own emotional state over someone else's emotional manipulation. They happen in the private spaces where you decide that your peace is not negotiable. Your dignity is not debatable. Your worth is not dependent on someone else's opinion. Manipulators want chaos. The Stoic gives them silence. In that silence, something profound occurs. The manipulator, deprived of the emotional reaction they crave, is forced to confront the emptiness they've been using your energy to avoid. They're forced to sit with their own discomfort, their own insecurity, their own pain. This is not cruelty on your part. This is kindness. By refusing to enable their avoidance, you're giving them the opportunity to face themselves. By refusing to participate in their emotional drama, you're forcing them to find healthier ways to meet their emotional needs. Most won't take this opportunity. Most will move on to find someone else who's willing to provide the emotional reactions they crave. But some of you will eventually realize that the pattern they've been living is unsustainable. That the relationships they've been creating are unsatisfying. That the person they've been being is not who they want to be. Your silence might be the gift that helps them find themselves. Your refusal to engage might be the boundary they need to discover their own inner resources. But even if it's not even, if they never change, never grow, never learn, you will have changed. You will have grown. You will have learned. You will have learned that you don't need anyone's permission to be at peace. You will have learned that you don't need anyone's understanding to understand yourself. You will have learned that you don't need anyone's approval to approve of your own choices. These lessons can't be taken from you. These insights can't be manipulated away from you. This wisdom can't be argued out of you. It becomes part of who you are. The man who walks into a room full of chaos and changes everything just by being himself, that man is you. It's not because you've learned to fight louder than everyone else, but because you've learned not to fight at all. Not because you've learned to be more dramatic than the drama, but because you've learned to be more real than the performance. You've learned the ancient art of psychological invincibility, not the kind that comes from being harder than everyone else, but the kind that comes from being more yourself than anyone else can make you be otherwise. In a world full of people trying to make you into something you're not, being yourself is the ultimate act of rebellion. In a culture that profits from your emotional reactivity, maintaining your emotional sovereignty is the ultimate act of revolution. You are that rebellion. You are that revolution. One breath at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of silence at a time. The manipulator will eventually move on to easier targets. The drama will eventually find a more willing audience. Chaos will eventually seek someone else to provide its energy. But you will remain unbroken, unmanipulated, uncompromised, standing in the quiet power of your own presence. Watching the storms pass by, grateful that you learned to be the mountain instead of getting caught in the weather. This is your peace. This is your power. This is who you were always meant to be.